Hi everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. This week in data breaches, just like all the others, no time to lose, let's dive right in. But as always, thank you so much to the following people that sent me a lot of this information. That would be Ava Robin, Steve Macaluso, Charlie Walker, and Jacqueline Wolf. Thank you very much, and please keep sending those tips my way. It really helps me out. And with that, we're going to dive right into our mini segment simply entitled, If You Just Spent Money on Cybersecurity, You Wouldn't Be Getting Sued and You Wouldn't Be Losing Your Reputation, because we've got some interesting ones. And the first one is Great Expressions. They have dental locations across the entire United States. And if you're a patient of them across the United States, you might be eligible for one-time payments up to $6,000 as part of their large multi-million-dollar settlement related to their data breach. So, if your social security number was accessed during the breach, you're eligible for a settlement that includes reimbursement of up to $500 for ordinary losses and up to $5,000 for extraordinary losses, compensation for up to 2 hours of lost time at $20 an hour, so basically $6,000, and you have until November 8th to claim this. Obviously, extraordinary losses are those losses that you can show that you literally did have your identity ripped off thanks to Great Expression. So here we go. I don't think anybody's smiling over there right now. Moving on. CashApp. Yes, CashApp, the big financial transaction app. And if you've had them for over the last 6 years or so, you now may be entitled to compensation because the company proposed a $15 million settlement earlier this year following 2 security incidents. And if you're eligible to make a claim, you only have a few weeks to do that. So you may be eligible to make this claim if you had a CashApp account between August 23 of 2018 through August 20th of this year, 2024. This settlement will cover up to $2,500 worth of out-of-pocket expenses stemming from the data breach, as well as up to 3 hours of lost time at $25 an hour. Quite frankly, I think we're all worth more than that. So those who have substantial losses can then obviously file for reimbursement. Your deadline is November 19th at 2 a.m. Eastern Time. So let's just say November 18th. So heads up to you. Get moving CashApp, folks. Get moving Great Expression. Let's end this mini segment because if those two had simply paid for cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting sued and they definitely wouldn't have lost their reputation. Moving on, I want to give you an update on United Health, the massive data breach. After completing their investigation into this February 2024 breach, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said this week that roughly 1/3 of all Americans' data was indeed exposed in this attack. These findings confirm United Health statements back in April that obviously this was a huge issue. About 1/3 of us, are huge. They're running a ton of pharmacies. And so heads up, I actually also got notice of the Change Healthcare data breach in the mail. Didn't even realize my local pharmacy was using them, but here we are. Moving on. Let's talk about the Oregon Department of Corrections. A staff member accidentally emailed out personally identifiable information. I do not have a list on 861 individuals. That includes social security numbers and even FBI background information data and more. So if you're basically on lockdown, one, you're probably not listening or watching this, but if you work for the Oregon Department of Corrections, heads up to you. Moving on. Let's head on over to Texas and talk about the Dallas County Hospital District, aka Parkland Health. On October 22nd, they filed with Texas after discovering that an unauthorized party was able to access information on their infrastructure. And in this notice, Parkland basically said, the information is what you would think it is: names, dates of birth, and medical info. Upon completing their investigation, they are sending out notices as well. So heads up if you use Parkland Health for all your health needs. Moving on, I want to give you a update on Henry Schein. This is that Fortune 500 healthcare company here because basically a year later, they finally confirmed in a data breach notification to the Attorney General of Maine that a ransomware gang did indeed steal data for 166,432 people during those attacks. So there it is. These things are ongoing, and I'll keep you up to date. Moving on. Summit Pathology on October 18. Summit Pathology, aka Summit, filed with Massachusetts after discovering an unauthorized party was able to access and gain entry into their network. And it's the usual suspects of data loss, talking names, address, medical billing and insurance, medical information, dates of birth, social security numbers, and financial information as well. Summit is now sending out letters and notifications. Moving on, let's talk about the crypto payment processor Transact. That's Tran, S-A-K. So with that, they exposed the information of more than 92,000 people after an employee's laptop was accessed. Now, the company said this past Sunday, about a week ago, that, quote, no financially sensitive or critical information was compromised, end quote, but did admit that names, birthdays, passport, driver's license information, and users' selfies, for some reason, were leaked in the breach. So maybe not financial, but I would consider that critical information. Just heads up, Transact. They said that it only affected, for the record, only 1% of their base. A quote-unquote sophisticated phishing attack granted access to that laptop. So that's why you train, that's why you defend. Moving on. Let's talk about Ciox Health, also known as Datavant or Datavant Group. On October 7, they filed with Health and Human Services after basically they got breached. Unauthorized disclosure. I do not have a list of it, just that it's sensitive information belonging to certain individuals, and Ciox Health, aka Datavant, is now sending notices out as well. Moving on, let's keep it health and talk about Community Dental. On October 15th, they filed with Massachusetts, and in that notice, they said an unauthorized party gained access to full names, addresses, social security, dates of birth, health insurance information, medical information, including treatment and diagnosis information as well. Community Dental sending out notices also. Moving on, here's one we haven't talked about in a while, but it's been going on for almost 2 years now. MoveIt. That's right. We have yet another disclosure coming out of MoveIt, even though it's been, a year and a half plus at this point? So now, for this past week, we have the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and also their contractor, who is the one that actually got the breach, which is Wisconsin Physician Service Insurance Corporation. 3,112,815 individuals caught up in that. MoveIt, still probably the worst data breach in terms of records we've ever seen in the history of nerddom. Moving on, Chimiente and Associates, they filed with Massachusetts after an unauthorized party was able to access an employee's email account, and the usual suspects once again for data: name, social security, state-issued IDs, dates of birth, health information, and financial account information. Chimiente is also sending out notices, so if you use them for all your Chimiente or associate needs, I don't know what they do, heads up to you. Moving on, National Financial Services, or NFS, also filed with Massachusetts on behalf of MML Investor Services, so supply chain breach. Now, NFS explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party being able to gain access to certain information. I do not have that list, but NFS is now sending out on behalf of MML, because we're all in this together. Supply chain hits left and right. Moving on, Floyd County Public Schools in scenic Virginia. Virginia is the place with the most data centers per capita, which I recently learned a couple weeks ago. Pretty cool. Now, they first reported cybersecurity issue back in September. Superintendent Jessica Cromer said in an email this past Friday that some personal information may have been compromised and accessible to these criminals. I do not know 100% of it, but they did mention on the website that names, addresses, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, social security numbers, and medical information, obviously for employees, may be caught up in this. So heads up to you, Floyd County Public Schools. Hopefully it's not as bad. Moving on, I want to talk about Cisco, not the famous rapper from the 2000s, but the Cisco, massive networking and infrastructure provider. And we have an update from the breach that I talked about last week, because this past Friday, Cisco has finally confirmed that indeed some of their files were stolen by the attacker known as Intel Broker and then offered for sale, basically on breach forums, etc. And so Cisco finally admitting what I reported on last week. So that's progress? I don't know, but heads up if you're a Cisco customer. Moving on, let's talk about ATSG. They filed with Health and Human Services on October 4th of this year, saying that confidential information that was previously provided to them was subject to unauthorized access. In other words, I gave them info, they got the info breached. I don't know who they are. I don't think I gave them info, but you know what I mean. Now, in this notice, ATSG explained unauthorized access to sensitive information do not have a list, but 909,469 individuals are getting letters from ATSG. So if you use them for all your ATSG healthcare something needs, here we are. Moving on. We have finally, there were not a lot of breaches this week, but this one is an interesting one and an important one. Now, if you are not living under a rock, you know that the United States, as well as other countries, but specifically the United States, is going through a major presidential election. We have the current Vice President, Kamala Harris, running against the former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. I do not care who you vote for. That is not the point of this. This is what's going on. And then multiple resources are reporting on this, but the AP had a good write-up on it. And so let's get down to business. And again, this is affecting both campaigns. And here's what happened. A Chinese attacker, or specifically attackers, may be engaged in a broader espionage operation targeting the cell phones used by Donald Trump, obviously the Republican nominee for president, his running mate, J.D. Vance, Senator of Ohio, going for vice president, and also people associated with Vice President Kamala Harris, obviously the nomination to be president of the United States, and not her specifically, but people on her campaign. This is according to multiple people talking, obviously, to the press. Now, it was not immediately clear what data, if any, may have been accessed. U.S. officials are continuing to investigate, according to the sources that are talking about this, and essentially these sources were not authorized to publicly discuss this ongoing issue as they were talking to the Associated Press and a whole bunch of other publications. But an FBI statement did not confirm the identities of any potential targets, but it did say that it was investigating a, quote, unauthorized access to commercial telecommunications infrastructure by actors affiliated with the People's Republic of China, end quote. So, odds are they're looking at Microsoft Office 365 via cell phone data. That's my guess, but we'll see what happens. And I quote again, agencies across the U.S. government are collaborating to aggressively mitigate this threat and are coordinating with our industry partners to strengthen cyber defenses across the commercial communications sector, again, according to the FBI. Now, U.S. officials believe the campaigns were among numerous targets of a larger cyber espionage campaign launched by China. Now, remember, China is basically responsible for the hacking group Volt Typhoon that has been breaking into an absolute ton of U.S. infrastructure. Now, it's not immediately clear what information China hoped to glean, though obviously Beijing for years has had a vast hacking campaign, as I mentioned, Volt Typhoon, but they've been collecting private data on Americans, government workers, spying on technology, corporate secrets. I mean, this is why we had the McCain Act that, banned Huawei, DJI, ZTE, and a whole bunch of others from basically government use, and they're not fans on the commercial side either. So, news that high-profile political candidates and their campaigns were targeted comes as U.S. officials remain on high alert for foreign interference in the final stretch of the presidential campaign. Remember, we're like 10 days away from this. It's like a week and change from now. So, by virtue of that, Iranian hackers, if you recall, and I talked about this in a separate segment, basically had been blamed for targeting the Trump campaign officials, and the Justice Department had exposed vast information, basically on disinformation that was orchestrated by Russia, which all indicators said were favoring Trump over Harris. Again, don't care what you believe, but the Russians have been doing that for quite some time. I've been actually privy to a chunk of that. Now, China, by contrast, interestingly enough, unlike the Russians, they're believed by U.S. Intel to be taking a neutral stance in the specific race for president. Instead, they've been focusing on down-ballot races targeting candidates from both parties based on their stances on issues that are of key importance to Beijing, including support for Taiwan. In other words, your local member of Congress might be running and saying, Taiwan should be part of China. Well, they're going to help that dude as much as they can. But if you've got a potential member of Congress saying that China has nothing to do with Taiwan and Taiwan should be an independent country, well, China is probably going to want to see what you're emailing, communicating, and any damning information you've got on your phone, pictures, videos, who knows. Now, the New York Times was the first to report that basically former President Trump and Senator Vance had been targeted, and said that the campaign basically was advised this past week. And so they've known about it for some time. Now, 3 people confirmed this news to the Associated Press, including one who said that people associated with Vice President Harris's campaign were also targeted as well. And a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington this past Friday basically said that they were not familiar with the specifics and could not comment, but contended that China is routinely victimized by cyber attacks and opposes this activity. Aren't we all? Right? So there you go. Take it for what it's worth, but understand that when you're talking about any kind of major election here in the United States, especially one as contentious as what we have here in the U.S., we're going to see espionage, influence operations, all this kind of stuff from various foreign state actors. I mean, for God's sakes, the Internet Research Agency out of Russia, basically, we know the address of that building. We have every single campaign ad they've ever done. You can go read all of them. I've done a lot of research on those, for like internal papers, like all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating to see essentially how they work and how they operate. But when you're behind the scenes and you're not publicly dumping these things out, trying to run influence operations, getting basically damning information on candidates, and I guess down ballot in this case, is a big important thing for China as they track how the United States, their biggest adversary on the entire planet, is going to basically look at Taiwan, Hong Kong, anything that we're not fans of, with the Chinese, including the Uyghurs. So we'll see what happens, but those were your breaches of the week. Another crazy week, although not as many this week, and that's not a bad thing. So here we are. Good luck to us all. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.